Hey friends, my name is Erin and it is time to wrap up January. Alright guys, my reading was all over the place, but I did actually get 12 books off that forever long TBR list. So I want to wrap those up. I'm going to do my quick wrap up style because it works for me and I hope it works for y'all too. But I did want to start by showing you my page count graph. And I don't know, my graph is going to show you just how chaotic my reading was all over the place. So I did have one DNF and one of these is an audiobook, but I'm just going to go through these in the order that I read and finished them. I started off the year with The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers. I did a dedicated review, which you'll see a tab for up here somewhere, but this book was amazing. I basically had it finished by the third day in January and a review up by like the middle of January because I wanted to gush about it. It's such a good book. So quick summary, I try and do, in case you didn't watch last month's, I'm going to try and do summaries in like a 1 or 2 sentence, fun little quip style. Got a group of tunnelers out in space. They get sent on a slightly dangerous mission, but it's all the way across the universe, so they go on some mini adventures along the way. Not only does it have amazing found family and friend group, it has some really deep conversations just randomly thrown in amongst the adventure that is just as fun to read, and you're really gonna find yourself thinking about life and friendship and all sorts of stuff. If you like sci-fi, if you like found family, definitely check this one out for sure. In fact, I don't even have like a worst thing about it because I really loved it. The next few weren't quite as much of a hit for me. After that, I picked up The Good Luck Girls by Charlotte Nicole Davis. We have 4 girls who were sold into the sex trade. It's kind of a Wild West version of them getting revenge, really. Getting revenge and getting out. I think this covered some really hard topics. There are definitely trigger warnings in this that you should look up and be aware of before you get into it. I think the deep topics were covered really well. The way they looked at different ways that affected the girls in the group and the implications it had on how they saw themselves, how they related to people, it was really well done. However, the characters I felt like were lacking. A lot of the side characters were very one note, and the main character was very, very angry, which given the circumstance made sense, but her anger didn't really match up with what she was saying. She said she felt like she had to survive and do what was best for the group, but then she'd go and run into these crazy situations and put everybody at risk. She said she couldn't trust anybody, which again makes sense given where she's coming from, but she would do that to the point where she would just blatantly ignore the obvious answer. She would push back to the point of, again, it being dangerous for the group. Along with there were a lot of plot conveniences. They needed money, they found a guy with the code to the bank. I think something I also struggled with was the world building was pretty lacking. There was all these cool things that were mentioned as like a side note that felt like they should have been big things. Her sister can see ghosts. They have branding on their face that lights up and does all these interesting things that kind of corrals them and controls them, but none of it is ever explained. It's just mentioned. Ended up giving it a 2-star rating. I think you would like this book if you want tough topics but an easier read. Then I followed up with Housekeeping by Marilynne Robinson. So in this we have 2 girls who you watch grow up in a small town and they get passed from one unstable adult to another. This book is super atmospheric. Most of this is describing their hometown and the wintry scenes and the lake. The description was really well done. Unfortunately, I'm a plot reader and this had like no plot. It is 90% setting and about 10% character study. It didn't work for me, unfortunately. I do think you would like it if you like an atmospheric book and kind of a slower look at life with that really descriptive setting. This is a good book for that. but for me, it ended up being another 2-star rating. I had my audiobook finished after that, and that was Spellslinger by Sebastian de Castell. I'll put a picture up. This was amazing, and I highly recommend it as an audiobook because some of the character voices made it over the top good. We have a boy who's trying to become a mage. His family is very powerful. Unfortunately, he can't find his magic. And that could mean that he ends up exiled. It could mean that he ends up a servant. Of course, he's the main character, so you know something's gonna happen. This has some of the best sidekicks and animal companions. Amazing. Just amazing. If you want a good animal companion book, this is it. And again, audiobook, please. I struggled again to come up with some negatives for this. I do think the sister character was hard to like, which it was intentional, but there were some times where it was like, all right, just let's move on from Charla for a bit. You also had the character continually trusting in people who you were like, I didn't trust from day one, but he's a kid, so you understand it, but as a reader, you're like, all right, buddy, wake up, wake up. Aside from those like minor annoyances that truly fit the book anyway, another 5-star for sure. After that, I finished the Stainless Steel Trio. I forget who this is by. It starts with an H. I think both names starts with an H. Anyway, look here. This follows an arrogant criminal mastermind who gets swept up in one shenanigan after another. It is 3 short stories. It's the first 3 in this set. And this character is not particularly likable at first, but he's super impressive. And so you end up just kind of being okay with it. I think one of my favorite things is how he manages to just go along with any situation and turn it so it works for him. So for instance, there's one point where he's trying to go undercover. He needs a new identity, so he steals one from this guy that works at a bar and walks out of the bar to find out that that guy was supposed to be in the army but somehow got out of it. So he gets drafted into the army, and instead of like freaking out and it being this crazy like, oh, how's he gonna get out of this, he just keeps stealing identity and working his way up and pretending like he is supposed to be there until he's like a captain. It was so much fun to watch him just twist and turn things and end up on top all the time. I think by the end of those 3, they're pretty short stories, about 200 pages each, and by the end I was a little bit detached because there isn't a consistent side character, and I feel like I did struggle. I just wanted someone else to kind of attach to and relate to. All the books had minor characters that showed up that were really fun to get to know, but because they're already short stories and they don't really transfer as much, I give this a 3.75, and I think you would like it if you like criminal masterminds or if you like a bad boy. After that, I picked up my Goosebumps. This is The Haunted School, and it is one of my favorite Goosebumps. I remember reading it still very clearly, which is not the case with some of the others, and it was so fun to come back to. So in this, we have a kid who moves to a new school, and he starts hearing voices calling for help. And it turns out there are kids on the other side of this wall that are stuck in a world without color. I think overall it's a pretty cool concept, and the way they get into it and out of it is pretty interesting considering it's a short little guy. I followed that up with another short one, and that is Saga Volume 2. We have the parents of a forbidden couple meet up with them, and they get to meet their granddaughter for the first time. Meanwhile, though, an assassin is hunting down the whole gang. I've talked about this before, but the art in this is pretty beautiful. There is some really graphic but amazing species in this. And my favorite thing about this one in particular in the series so far is the daughter-in-law, father-in-law relationship. It got really sweet and heartfelt at the end of it. One struggle I would say is, again, there's a lot of POV switches, and if you don't read them consistently, sometimes it is harder to keep track of. There were several times where I was like, who is this again? This got a 4-star rating from me, and I would recommend this if you want a graphic novel, because there is a monster in this that is, let's just say, completely nude and has a lot to bear. We come to my first DNF of the year. This was The Assassin's Gate by George Parker. So this is supposed to tell the history behind America invading Iraq and kind of how 9/11 played a part in the war on terror, but also other factors. So I think if you have prior knowledge, this could work for you. It is an interesting topic and something I want to learn more about and know more about. This version though I think expects you to have some background, and maybe I just didn't read far enough. I read about 100 pages. The first chunk of it was just a weird listing of names. So it would be like, this guy Micaiah, he worked at this place and wrote this article with Wolfstein, and Wolfstein worked with Cheney, and then in 1979 he moved over to this department where guess who was there? This guy, and they wrote an article called this. It was just a weird list of people that kept circling back around. And it was like their mentors and the articles they wrote. Honestly, I could not keep anybody straight. Also, I don't know if it was author biased or jokes or what, but there was a lot of like weird descriptions that I didn't know what to make of it, because I don't know enough to know if it was like public opinion at the time or the author's opinion or just a weird way to describe what was happening. So I'm just gonna, I can't really describe this, but I'm just going to read this little bit. If Cheney and Rumsfeld were the bureaucratic heavyweight, the leading intellect of post-September 11 policy was Wolfowitz. In weeks after the terror attacks, there was a surprising convergence between the former oilman president, whose favorite philosopher was Jesus, and who could mock his own sub-mediocre academic record because it didn't matter, and his brilliant Deputy Secretary of Defense, a secular Jew with a Cornell B.A. in mathematics and a Chicago Ph.D. in political science, whose influences were Albert Wolfsetter, Leo Stratus, and Alan Bloom. That was one sentence. And I don't understand it. Anyway, point being, I DNF'd this. Okay, 3 more books. The next up was King Lear, and in this, a king banishes one of his daughters, and it turned out to be the wrong one because the other 2 stab him in the back. I definitely recommend the No Fear Shakespeare because there is some serious shade thrown in this play. It was one of my favorite parts, and the No Fear Shakespeare version does a great job of letting you know exactly what's going down. I think the plot was a little slow, and that was one of my least favorite parts about this, but overall, I definitely enjoyed this. I would give it a 3-star, I guess. If you like family drama, this is a good play to pick up. The last one that I was going to read this month is A Flower in the Attic by V.C. Andrews. In this, a mother hides her 4 kids in the attic because she's trying to win back her inheritance. Horrible parenting ensues. This has, again, a lot of trigger warnings. A lot of trigger warnings, so please look them up. I've heard people say before I had picked this up that they didn't want to read it because it has incest in it, which it does, but I was like incredibly surprised by how much I loved this book. And there is a lot of hard topics, but the story of these 4 siblings is so truthful and introspective and heartfelt that I think it gives you a different look at a lot of those harder topics than you would expect just hearing the word incest. Obviously, it's not something you want to read about per se. This one actually brings some incredible depth to what's happening in these kids' life, and the incest is a piece of that is hard, but there are a lot of hard things happening to these kids. There is also a trigger warning for rape, and that is actually why it lost a little bit of points for me, because I feel like it could have easily gone in a different direction and still had the same impact. I think it still deserves a look, but I think it really is a beautiful book, and if you enjoy character studies, this one is incredible. I would be really interested to hear what you think if you've read this book, because I didn't know anything about it going in, aside from I had heard some keywords, and I'm interested to see if anybody else had those same hesitations going in and how they felt by the end of the book. First book I was going to read in February was The Lost Symbol by Dan Brown, and I actually finished it in January. So we follow Professor Langdon in this one, and he's again trying to solve some of those ancient mysteries, but this time it's to save some friends. I think it's always fun to follow the mysteries when I read these books, to read the clues, to try and figure them out. It's just a good treasure hunt kind of feel. However, I think this one had less of the treasure hunt vibes. I wanted a little bit more of this, and the overall concept was more ambiguous than I remember in the other one. I gave this a 3.5 rating, and I think you would like it if you like thought-provoking mysteries. I am pretty happy with that first month. I think it was all over the place rating wise, but there were some of my favorite books. I'm pretty sure Spellslinger and The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet, maybe even A Flower in the Attic, are going to be in some of my top reads of the year. So yeah, let me know how your January was. Let me know if you've read A Flower in the Attic and what you thought about it, because I really think it's an interesting book, but I can see how some people would have a hard time reading it. So I just want to know more. Alright, I will see y'all later. Here is the official January stack. There you have it. Bye, guys.